Okay, that's the end of the video. I'm gonna call.
Alright. So that's it for the fourth one. And fifth, the final one, the disgusting downfall of Omegle.com. Hopefully I don't get taken down, because I'm glad these good people censor all of this shit just for us to watch it during live. We can do this, guys. We can.
In November of 2023, Omegle, the infamous and massively popular roulette-style video chat site, was shut down by its owner, Leif K. Brooks, ending its nearly 14-year run under somewhat troubling circumstances. So, what happened? Well, if you're like me, you grew up with Omegle as a teenager and probably ran into your fair share of grown men exposing themselves on the platform. This sort of activity has plagued Omegle since its inception, with many sick adult users intentionally broadcasting illegal material to the unsuspecting underage users of the site. The prevalence of this dangerous material on Omegle is what eventually would lead to the platform's demise, with the owner becoming so disillusioned by the chat site that he created that he killed it, feeling as though he had created a monster. And he was getting hit with a bunch of lawsuits. Today, I'll be going through each of Omegle's major criminal controversies in chronological order, telling the story of the sick freaks that got this website taken down. This is the disgusting fall.
Oh, glad I didn't win on Omegle. I was a kid back then.
Of Omegle. Today's video is sponsored by Cook Unity. Cook Unity offers weekly batches of gourmet meals prepared by our country's best restaurants and chefs and ships them right to your front door. Each Cook Unity meal is prepared in a regional micro kitchen and is shipped at the peak of freshness. They arrive fresh, never frozen, and are fully cooked and ready to eat. All you gotta do is heat them up, which is perfect for anybody with a busy schedule like yours truly. And with that out of the way, let's take a look at what's on the Cook Unity menu tonight. First off, we've got this adobo flank steak with potato and broccoli. The steak is super tender, and the little sauce that goes on top of it, slapping, dude. Next, we have the classic pasta bolognese with Parmigiano. And guys, this one just hits. I get cravings for pasta all the time, and like bolognese is just my go-to. I gotta stop eating this because I have another meal to try. Shit, I can't. And last but
that was
not
so.
least, I've got
I bet this is addicting.
Peruvian-style chicken thighs
This
with
guy.
cilantro rice and brown butter plantains. Get a little chicken bite going here. This is what you want. That's some good stuff, guys. Subscriptions start as low as $11 a meal, and the plan is super flexible. You can choose from 4 to 16 meals a week, and it's commitment free. You can skip or pause delivery, cancel at any time. You guys can get 50% off your first order of Cook Unity meals by going to cookunity.com/wavywebsurf and by using code WavyWebSurf50 at checkout. Big thanks to Cook Unity for sponsoring today's video.
Oh boy. It's about to get bad, chat.
One of Omegle's first high-profile criminal degenerate users was a man named Richard Finkbeiner, a sick individual responsible for one of the most elaborate sextortion plots in United States history. In 2010, Richard Finkbeiner was a 39-year-old man living in Brazil, Indiana. Constantly online, this disgusting man would begin sexually interacting with minors in online video chats, using Omegle along with other platforms, recording his victims throughout these.
Trust me, guys. Yesterday I was playing Fortnite during stream. One of my fans that are minors wanted to talk to me in Fortnite, but I can't talk to kids because I'll get exposed for that. So, I dodged for that one, so.
Calls. According to the FBI, Finkbeiner, while using Omegle, would stream videos of pornography to those that he matched with, in an attempt to coerce.
Why? Why would you ever do this, buddy? Bro.
Incoming minors to reciprocate acts in a sexual way. The minors,
yeah,
who thought they were interacting with the person shown in the porn video, would then be asked by Finkbeiner in text chat to join in, and some would sadly follow his instructions. When a minor fell for his trap, Finkbeiner would then record their camera footage and add it to his personal CP collection. And if that wasn't depraved enough for you, this guy would often later anonymously contact his victims, revealing to them the fact that he had recorded them participating in those sexual behaviors, almost in a braggadocious manner, like, "I got you." While performing digital surveillance on his victims, Richard would collect their sensitive personal details, later using that information for blackmail, threatening to release the videos to porn websites or to send them to the victims' friends, family, and school teachers, unless these victims continued making sexually explicit content with him, recruiting the minors as digital sex slaves of sorts, forced to participate in acts with him while he recorded them for his catalog. According to FBI reports, these acts included coercing them into exposing themselves, forcing them to wear embarrassing outfits, and even forcing them to scribble Finkbeiner's
What a freak! If I was him, I wouldn't do that. No.
online alias
Never
on
in
their
a million
body
years,
with a
bro.
permanent marker.
Nah.
Through these elaborate and sickening strategies, Richard was able to collect a multitude of victims, both male and females, whose ages ranged from 12 years old to 17, and were living in 9 different states, including Indiana, West Virginia, Iowa, Wisconsin, Ohio, New York, Michigan, Illinois, and Colorado. There was even one case involving a 12-year-old boy with transcripts showcasing the poor kid pleading with Richard in messages to not release his blackmail video to the internet, and the sick man essentially telling the boy tough luck and uploading the stuff anyways. Dude was a sadist and psychopath, a pedophilic monster. Another incident showing how hard...
Right, the real pedophile. See what I meant, chat? If you grew minors online in real life, you're going to jail. That means you're a pedophile. Not if you post content that you want to impress your fans. And yeah, you're not a pedophile for trying to post content. But some of these guys were just morons and have no daddy.
This guy was involved a teenage girl who was so traumatized after falling victim to Finkbeiner's trap, she attempted suicide. Thankfully, she would survive.
What the fuck?
Now, she later sent an email to Finkbeiner stating what she had done, and Finkbeiner would then reply with, "Glad I could help." Finkbeiner was able to get away with performing these highly exploitative acts for around 2 years. But sexual extortion reports from some of his later victims, a 14-year-old boy in Maryland and another in Michigan, would catch the attention of the feds. Authorities began an investigation, setting up a collaboration between the FBI and sheriff departments from all over the country where the reported crimes were taking place. This included the Oakland County, Michigan Sheriff's Department and the Prince George County's Maryland Department, with significant assistance from the Indiana State Police, the Clay County Sheriff's Department, the Terre Haute Police Department, and the Kokomo Police Department. It was truly a national endeavor. After a thorough investigation, authorities were able to trace these sickening crimes back to Richard, and he was pinned as the culprit. The monster of Omegle would finally be arrested on April 6th of 2012, with the feds seizing a staggering 22,000 video files from webcam feeds recorded by Finkbeiner, half of which depicted sexual content from his sextortion ventures. The FBI also recovered close to 47,000 downloaded images, many of which depicted CP. The police would then begin the work in unwrapping his elaborate sextortion scheme, which would give Finkbeiner additional charges. In total, Finkbeiner was charged with 10 counts of sexual exploitation of children, 2 counts of extortion, and 1 count of possession of CP. The CP charge came from Richard both possessing images from the minors that he had extorted, as well as an entirely different collection of files. These are some serious charges, but they don't truly reflect the massive victim pool that Finkbeiner had accumulated. Through reviewing the man's email communications, authorities were able to ascertain that there were at least 153 victims, and only 20 of them had been identified by name and confirmed by the authorities. Law enforcement would say, quote, "These charges formalize allegations of a systemic scheme to victimize hundreds of children and teenagers all over the country." Thanks to the tireless work of investigators over the last 3 months, we have been able to identify and contact many victims of these alleged acts. This process is ongoing, and we continue to do all we can to offer support after the nightmare they are alleged to have endured. Richard faced a maximum of 30 years in prison for each count of sexual exploitation of children, 2 years for the extortion charges, and a $250,000 fine for each of the charged offenses. In January of 2013, Richard would plead guilty to the charges of sexual exploitation and CP, and the deviant would be sentenced to serve 40 years in prison and was hit with a $70,000 fine, all coming on June 26
That's
of
a lot of
2013.
money.
It was also determined that after he was done serving his prison sentence, Richard would be forced to serve a lifetime of supervised release. At the time of his case being concluded, it was one of the largest sextortion cases in the country. This was the first major case where a criminal used Omegle to facilitate his crime, and it most certainly wouldn't be the last time the site would see foul play. Now we jump forward about 3 years to 2013 to our next case. It's the story of military serviceman Colin Lowry, a man not guilty for sex crimes against children, but for killing someone live on camera, broadcasting the act to an unsuspecting user live on Omegle, that user being still unknown to this day. On October 22nd of 2013, a 22-year-old Nevada Army reservist named Colin Lowry, along with 23-year-old Cherish Pincombe, were hanging out together with one of Colin's roommates named Patrick within Colin's home in Henderson, Nevada. During this chill session, they decided it would be fun to hop on Omegle and talk to some strangers, as one would do back in 2013. But sadly, this would be no routine night on Omegle, as a freak tragedy would begin to unfold the moment that their webcam booted up. According to reports, the story goes as follows. After chatting to a few different people, Colin and Cherish were matched up with a woman from Norway, who, curious about American culture, had asked if the group owned any guns. Colin, a military serviceman, most certainly did, and would promptly step out of view of the camera, returning after a short while with his rifle and a .45 caliber handgun. He then would begin eagerly showcasing the firearms to the anonymous Omegle user. Now, at some point, Colin is said to leave the area of the Omegle camera setup to go use the bathroom, leaving his guns at the computer, only to return again shortly after. By this point, the Norwegian had left, and another Omegle user is said to have been paired up with them. Now, what happens next is somewhat disputed, as the footage is not available for the public to view. But it's alleged that while resuming showing off his handgun, Colin would raise the pistol to Cherish's head in what could be described as a joking fashion and would pull the trigger, possibly believing that it wasn't loaded. The gun would discharge, shooting Cherish in the head, causing the woman to go limp. She was critically injured, and the shooting was broadcasted live to an anonymous viewer. While I'm unable to ascertain at what time of night or early morning the shooting occurred, at around 8:30 a.m., Colin Lowry would call 911 and report that a gun had been accidentally discharged within his home. Cherish Pincombe would be taken to the Sunrise Hospital, where she would later sadly die from the injuries that she had sustained in the shooting. When questioned by the police, Colin would admit that he had been drinking alcohol, but stated that he had no idea that the handgun was loaded, trying to plead the case of this whole thing being nothing more than a freak accident. Considering the apparent negligence at play, police felt this to be more than just a mistake and arrested Colin for the killing. He would insist that it wasn't his fault, even reportedly claiming that Cherish had loaded the weapon while he was in the bathroom. An interesting twist if true. However, investigators pushed back, stating that Colin had likely taken the weapon to the bathroom with him, inserting the magazine and loading it in there. Yeah, if you haven't picked up on it, the cops believe that Colin had straight up murdered this woman in cold blood like it was premeditated. In fact, they went as far as insinuating this whole situation was much more than accidental manslaughter. It was some sort of methodical thrill kill, with Colin booting up Omegle with the intention of slaying his friend live on camera. That's what they thought. Now, it's to note that there were no other witnesses within the room when the shooting occurred. Colin's roommate was apparently no longer around when this transpired. The cops had to get their hands on the Omegle footage, as it likely held the truth of what actually took place that evening. police subpoenaed the Portland, Oregon-based website Omegle for footage of the shooting to possibly attain some sort of evidence to confirm their suspicions. They would receive some snapshots from Omegle, but it was only the chat portion of the website. These conversations, including some messages from Lowry, Pincombe, and the person that they were matched with. Sadly, though, it appears footage had not been archived by Omegle. But what about the other person on the other end of the video chat? Couldn't they speak to what had happened? Sadly, due to the anonymous nature of Omegle, this person has never been identified, and investigators were unable to ascertain any IP or metadata that could lead them in the right direction in regard to finding the enigmatic witness of the Omegle shooting. If someone was watching their screen at the time, it's very likely that they are keeping that gruesome moment with them to the grave, as no one has ever come forward. The snapshots recovered by the cops would unfortunately reveal very little, and it was a dead end barking up that tree. Collins' case would have to move forward without any video evidence and approached with a more traditional forensic style. After his arrest, Collins' bail would be set at $200,000, and investigators checked the magazine.
Wait.
To arrest, Collins' bail.
And Arrogant was set for December 10th. That was on my birthday! I'm serious, chat. It was set for my birthday. On this day.
Bail would be set at $200,000, and investigators checked the magazine for Cherish's fingerprints to see if Collins' story had checked out. They would find that the physical evidence didn't show any of Cherish's fingerprints on the magazine. Something else interesting to think about here, Colin Lowry was a trained staff sergeant in the military reserve. He had many years of weapons training. Apparently weapons training that he decided to just randomly forego on that day and act like a fool. I'm not trying to say that I know for a fact that Colin had a actual, inclination of murdering Cherish, but it is unusual for someone in the military to handle a gun this irresponsibly. There was reason for police to be suspicious. Later, Colin Lowry's roommates testified that Cherish and Colin, along with everyone else in the house, had a playful relationship with one another. Duffy, one of the other roommates, would even tell the court that he had not once ever seen Lowry get angry at Cherish. Colin Lowry's attorney would use this to argue that his client should be tried for manslaughter and not straight-up murder. Quote, "I heard no evidence whatsoever of premeditation, and I heard no evidence whatsoever of malice," the lawyer said. The judge would disagree and ordered that Colin should be tried on an open murder charge. In August of 2014, Colin would cut a deal with prosecutors and pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter with a weapon. And on October 24th of 2014, Colin Lowry would be sentenced to 8 to 20 years in prison. During sentence...
Dude. Whoa. 8 to 20 years? That was a long-ass time. I would have been like, maybe 21, 41?
Colin would apologize to
Damn.
Cherish's family within the courtroom, saying he had never meant to hurt anybody. It seems his words fell on deaf ears, though, as family members of the slain victim were quoted as calling Colin
a lying piece of shit.
Killer. It's somewhat unsettling to think that there is someone out there who may have watched this shooting take place live on Omegle and just has gone about their life with that horrific scene burned into their brain. Whoever you are, I hope you're doing well, and perhaps one day, come forward. Let's talk.
We're off to the day when I was
Sadly,
like 10 years
not long
old.
after the shooting incident, another child sexual exploitation case would come forward, involving a man named Dennis Witt, who would challenge underage girls on Omegle to a sick game in an effort to fulfill his twisted fantasies. Beginning in late 2013 and early 2014, 40-year-old Dennis Witt of Marina, California, would begin participating in
He's
behavior...
40? Heck, EDP is a lot older than this guy back then.
...that went beyond degeneracy, with the man frequenting websites like Omegle, pretending to be a 16-year-old boy named Lucas, using this fake persona...
Oh, nah. Hey, not to gay shame chat. That is weird. I didn't realize that he liked wiener. Cheese pizza, I bet.
He would interact with underage girls, never showing his face. During these chats, the 40-year-old fraud would quickly get sexual. Acting as Lucas, he devised the game, in which young girls would gain points for participating in lewd behavior. For example, girls would receive a point for taking off a piece of their clothing, or would receive more points by performing outright sex acts. A criminal complaint describes his activity. 3 girls began to play a game whereby they would do things on camera to earn points. Tasks began with things like waving and blowing kisses, but progressed to showing Lucas their genitalia, unquote. Dennis groomed these girls on Omegle and also on his Skype account that went by the username VampireGod, and his profile picture was a skull and crossbones. The guy is like a modern-day Camden Gerard Davis, but white and 40 years old. Now, what's truly sickening about Dennis in particular in the context of this video is the ages of the people that he victimized. The age range of his victims went from 16 all the way down to 7 years old. Just some really unspeakable crimes here. I say this with all seriousness. There are actual monsters that walk the earth, and I don't know how you could have any sympathy for someone like this. But it's just disgusting. The conversations with these 4 particular underage victims, who were all from Jefferson County, New York, began in May of 2013, according to the criminal complaint. It stated that during these interactions, Dennis recorded the girls 48 times between July 25th of 2013 and September 16th of 2013. The oldest one, at 16 years old, would communicate with Whit daily, with the others being communicated with far less frequently. While Dennis performed these abhorrent acts with the children, it would not be long before the authorities got tipped off, as one of the fathers of the 4 underage victims from Jefferson County, New York, would find about the activities and alert the proper authorities and channels. The FBI, when alerted to this, would team up with the Silicon Valley Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, a group that specializes in targeting people who produce and distribute CP online. Together, they were able to find Dennis's Gmail, AOL account, and Skype account, and were able to backtrace these accounts, finding his IP address, which gave them his real-life location. The FBI then executed a search warrant, and on April 30th of 2014, authorities would storm into Dennis Witt's house in Marina, California, where they would confirm that Dennis was in fact Lucas, and they arrested the man and escorted him outside in handcuffs. In a darkly hilarious moment, the pathetic Dennis would be photographed in handcuffs wearing a "Wanted Dead or Alive" t-shirt. Looks like the fat degenerate slob really dressed up for the occasion. What else would you expect from some fucking loser that goes by VampireGod on the internet and abuses children? While in Dennis's house, authorities would search through his computer and find 48 video files and 20 image files consisting of CP. Some of these videos were over an hour long. There was also content containing other children found on the internet as well. In total, a catalog of over 10,000 videos and image files were looked through. After his arrest, Dennis would admit to the officers that he had captured the videos of the underage girls and saved them to a folder titled My Girls. Now, this guy is a true piece of work, ain't he? Dennis Witt would later be extradited to New York to face trial. He would plead guilty in November of 2014, and on April 8th, 2015, Dennis would be sentenced to 60 years in federal prison on 7 counts of sexually exploiting children. When released from prison, Dennis must be put on supervised release for life and will be required to register as a sex offender. From what I can find, there was an attempt to appeal the sentencing, but it was denied. Thank God. Let's take a breather. Now we enter an era of relative peace. Let's do a bit of an Omegle history lesson. Now, thankfully for the next several years, Omegle would be free from major criminal events. Yeah, old men still went on there to broadcast themselves jerking off, but for the most part, things were quiet on the site. People were using it as it was intended, to have fun and talk to strangers and make, unique friendships with people from across the world, as was the intention of the site's creator, Leif K. Brooks. Leaf had single-handedly developed Omegle while living at his parents' house when he was just 18 years old. He wanted to connect people from around the world in video form at random, a novel concept for the time. The 18-year-old just wanted people to have fun and communicate anonymously online. Talk to strangers, as was the slogan of the website. Launched in 2009, his creation was an instant hit, and Omegle would become established as a permanent part of internet culture in short time. A mainstay of web-based chatting visited
Okay,
by
this one's kinda
millions of
funny.
people from around the world since. After all, Omegle's premise and what it was intended for was actually quite remarkable for the time. I mean, real-time video chatting on a web browser back in 2009 was kind of a big deal. Like, I personally remember hopping on Omegle with some buddies and ending up matching with some other teenagers our age somewhere else in the US.
Well, I think we gotta stop there, so I think this video might be too long, so hope you guys enjoy. Comment, like, share, sub, and I'll see you guys in the next one, so